What I love to hear about is your relationship with money from as early as you can remember.
Always had plenty of food and a roof over our head and a nice place to live and cars to drive and all of those things. And so honestly, I never really had to think about it. Then everything kind of changed when I was 22. My dad died.
Oh.
And then a few years later, my mom died. And so all of that stability, financial and otherwise, just kind of went away. I didn't know at that time how much being a mortgage lender literally identifies with who I am and what I want, just all the way in the core. And so to be on the lending side, in my mind, it's the perfect mix between sales, where I get out and get to talk to people and help them feel good about the decisions that they're making and help educate them and help them not be afraid. I really love the problem solving component of it because that's a lot of what we have to do to make things work. You know, I found myself in my later 20s, a single mom with 2 children. I had to figure out my relationship with money just real quick. It's kind of one of those situations that you either figure it out or the consequences of not figuring it out are going to be catastrophic.
Chandler, you sit in a unique position as a VP and branch manager for loans where you have the chance to see money flow at a large scale. What I love to hear about is your relationship with money from as early as you can remember.
Okay. Well, as early as I can remember, if I go all the way back to being a kid, I really didn't have a relationship with money because I didn't have to think about money. My dad was a physician. All of my needs were always taken care of, always had plenty of food and a roof over our head and a nice place to live and cars to drive and all of those things. And so honestly, I never really had to think about it. I went to college. I got out of college with my bachelor's degree, debt-free. I didn't have any student loans. And then everything kind of changed when I was 22. My dad died.
Oh.
And then a few years later, my mom died. And so all of that stability, financial and otherwise, just kind of went away. And, I found myself in my later 20s, a single mom with 2 children that I needed to support on my own. And I had to figure out my relationship with money just real quick.
Yeah.
And I did. I knew that as a single mom that I needed to put myself in a position where I could make the best living that I could make to support them and myself. And at that time, I was in education. I had been in education for a long time. And so I inherited a little bit of money after my mother died, not much, but enough where I put myself back through school and got my master's degree and then took the necessary additional courses to become an administrator in the school system. And so that's what I did. And, I guess the rest is history with regard to my relationship with money, because now I'm just right smack dab in it all day, every day.
Yes.
And then after I was a single mom for a while with 2 children, I met my current husband. We've been married more than 25 years now. And we lovingly, and my family refer to him as Dave Ramsey. And so,
that's hilarious.
Even if I didn't want to have a relationship with money, I do.
Yes.
But I so appreciate, all of his guidance and just the stability that he's brought to our life and my life. And, my 2 older children, although he's not their biological father, they just have such utmost respect for him and his patience and just, who he is as a person. And a lot of that has to do with the stability that he's brought to us, with his hard work as well.
Where are you from? Where'd you grow up at?
Honestly, most of my growing up, I started off as a kid in New Orleans, but then we moved here when I was in elementary school. And then I grew up primarily on a farm in Crawford County.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay.
So that was where most of it was. I actually ended up graduating from Northside. We moved back to Fort Smith when I was in high school.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. Where'd you graduate from? Okay.
Yeah.
So coming from that perspective, living here, I could see that growing up and having, the lifestyle that you had, that other kids may not have liked that as much. Did you face any of that? What did that look like? What was your life like back in that time? Because I mean, it is a blessing to be able to have those opportunities and have that security and have that financial freedom, really, just to live as a kid. Because people, you know, they think kids don't think about money, but when it's affecting them in a negative way, when they don't have $20 to go to the game and everyone else has $20 to go to the game, they notice those things.
Right.
So how did it affect you?
Well, I think that, you know, first of all, the fact that my dad was a doctor, I think there can be some misconceptions, you know, that, oh, I'm sure there were thoughts of she's a spoiled little rich girl, her dad's a doctor. Probably what most people didn't know behind the scenes is that my dad was brought up very, very poor. And he's from Jackson, Mississippi. And, you know, he put himself through school, and he was in the Army as a physician to help pay for him to go to medical school. And so, you know, I think it was probably a little different at my house, because while all of our needs were taken care of, there were no such things in my childhood and growing up of my mom and I going shopping and splurging and doing those things together. We didn't do that. My dad was very conscientious about what was spent. When we turned 16, if you got a vehicle, it was probably something that had been sitting in the driveway for a while, and my dad had somebody vacuum it out and fill it up with gas.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you got the hand-me-downs, and you that's just what you did. And, you know, looking back, I think that helped all of us transition into adulthood, and especially because we were all just kind of on our own at a very young age in our 20s, you know, when our parents passed. And so I don't think that my upbringing really, probably what people saw on the outside was not really what was happening on the inside.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you find that a lot when you really look behind the curtains and you think, oh my gosh, because people just like to look at someone and identifies them for the problems that are happening in their lives. You know, I don't have enough money. It's because this person has it all. Or, you know, I don't like to be around this. Especially as a kid, you can see how easy your mind could go there. But when you grow up and you get to meet these people, you realize they're normal people, just like me. They have the same problems I do.
Right.
You know, they just don't fear not being able to eat. You know, which is a real thing.
It is a real thing.
Absolutely a real thing. But where we live now and in the age and time that we live, we do have a lot of people who are finding financial freedom, financial success very quickly, much more rapidly than before, if ever before.
Right.
With that being said, what I'm curious about is you said, you know, your father did grow up poor, what a lot of people did know. But with him becoming a physician and then getting access and coming into this new life with money, what maybe are some of the things that you notice now looking back as a grown adult who does have that kind of financial freedom for yourself that you would say maybe was, not that I'm trying to make you point out things bad about your dad, but that was negative because of the fact that he had like an influx of money in his life later on. Because sometimes you find that, you know, someone gets a lot of money and they're like cheap, you know, they're not frugal, these types of things. I'm not saying that's what your father was, but did you notice anything like that because of the way he grew up to the way he, you know, kind of made his success?
I think probably the most solid observation that I remember growing up is that while my dad was working all the time and making the money and making, you know, very good money, he was always the one trying to save the money and, you know, put it in investments or retirement or whatever. And looking back, I feel like he did that because my mom was always the one trying to spend the money. And so he knew if he didn't,
that's hilarious.
If he didn't, that everybody would end up, you know, broke at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so I think he was constantly trying to balance out, you know, what her desires were.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the role, you know, when my dad would go to the hospital to make rounds, he would wear overalls from the farm.
That's so funny.
And I mean, and they were always too short. I remember they were always too short. I was like, oh gosh, Dad. Anyway. So
that's hilarious.
He never really changed who he was at all.
Yeah. Okay. Second question on that too. Have you heard, well, you've heard of Dave Ramsey, right? So his daughter, she has kind of her own, I don't know if you call it empire, but she has her own thing and is successful. She's done a lot. But I've listened to a couple of different podcasts with her. Actually, Hannah Mooney, she done an episode with her, and I listened to it. But one of the things she talks about is how her father communicated to her and her family growing up about money. So I'm very curious what that looked like for you in your household, and what you, I don't know, if a parent, I feel like there are a lot of people who are listening now who just don't know how to make that connection to their child to help them understand, the ins and outs of money and how to run your household successfully. Some people feel like they don't even need to talk to their kid about that. Like it's not time for them yet until they become an adult and they're out the house. But you find that that's actually too late. So like, what did that look like for you in a successful way, or what do you think it should look like?
Well, what it looked like for me is that there wasn't any conversation. My brother and I have a joke now that like our parents provided everything we needed, but they didn't really parent us. I remember thinking in my early 20s, like I just didn't have the ability to really weigh options and make decisions that way. And I think a lot of that was because I think my parents did the very best they could based on their own upbringings and our situation and everything. But I don't know that we were actually parented.
Yes.
So in terms of like a financial lesson or teaching me how to look at options and maybe have to choose an option that was not the most comfortable, but certainly best in the long run, those types of things were never really taught or communicated to us. And, my mom didn't want to have a conversation about money. In fact, that was back in the days when I was in high school. That was in the days where you wrote checks for everything.
Yes.
And then you put them in the little envelope and put the stamp on them and you mail off your payment. Well, my mom would have to pay bills and she didn't want to do it. And so she would get the little TV tray and set it up, put what needs to be paid in her checkbook over here. And she would make me write all the checks and pay the bills. And then she would sign the check. Wow. And then I'd put it in the envelope and then go mail it. But all I remember about that was that she didn't want to do it.
Yes.
And that the bills that were to be paid, like some of them were, revolving credit cards, and maybe the balance is $500, the minimum payment's $20. How much do you want me to pay on this? And then she'd just throw out a number and I'd write the check for it and we'd move on down the road.
Wow.
But so really for her, there was kind of a whole element of avoidance.
Yes.
And so I learned how to write checks. I learned what revolving debt and installment debt was, but not because anybody ever really talked to me about it.
So how did that affect you when you got out the house? Because you said you hit this milestone, which I do want to get into this quite a bit too, of what that life looked like for you when you did lose all that security, when your father passed away. But how did that affect you when you moved out? The fact that you didn't have those conversations, because you had basically, people talk about the analogy of you teach a man how to fish, he is good forever, but if you just give him fish, he runs out when you leave. Well, they were giving you fish. You ran out when they left. So what did that look like for you? How did that affect you?
Well, I think it's kind of one of those situations that you either figure it out or the consequences of not figuring it out are going to be catastrophic.
Yes.
And, I had 2 young children that were solely dependent on me. And, when you've got those little ones that are depending on you for everything, you do what you have to do. And so, I would work, I would have a little side gig. I would do whatever I needed to do. But, it was still hard financially, but I had to really control what was spent. I had to, look at everything. And I remember as a single mom with my 2 kids, we never ate out. That wasn't even a thing. And because it is single-handedly, in my opinion, probably the most expensive thing that you do.
Yes.
Just in your day-to-day living.
Yes, for sure.
And so, my kids, I never even took them to McDonald's because we didn't really have the means to do that. And so we ate at home and, I packed their lunches or whatever it happened to be. And that's just what we did. And, you know, and I remember after my husband and I got married, we didn't have any money. I mean, neither he was trying to start his career. I'm trying to build mine. We've got 2 kids and he inherited 2 children overnight. He's trying to figure out how to be a dad and a husband and all of those things. And I just remember that at some point we became members at Fianna Hills Country Club. And it was when, you know, it was a few $100s.
Wait, is that where you lived at the time? Is Fianna Hills?
It's Fianna.
Okay.
When Philip and I got married.
Okay. So I asked that question because it really kind of, you know, that has always been seen more so back probably around this time. It's like the really nice part. So I can see how really people just misunderstand people, because if you're saying you were going through that at that time, you're living over there,
I didn't live there when I was a single mom.
Oh, okay.
When I was a single mom, I lived over in the little Park Hill area.
Okay.
Yeah. And we only moved to Fianna after we got married, and we had the combined income where we could buy something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, but even at that time, you say, you know, you were still having a lot of challenges that you were going through trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And I think that people, you know, just look at people and they just have a they have a mindset of what that person's lifestyle looked like when ideally they have no idea.
No,
you know?
No, they don't. But I just remember when we joined that country club, I just thought, oh my gosh, can we afford this? And, you know, Philip said, yes, we can. But so then once a week, we would go to church on Sundays, and once a week we would go to Vienna and have lunch. We'd take the kids to lunch. And that was our one meal out each week.
Wow.
And so I just remember being terrified, you know, that can we afford this? And, you know, Philip's always been really good to keep me in the loop on our finances. And for a lot of years after we got married, I really wanted to avoid those conversations. And I think it was because, you know, I'd been a single mom for so long and struggled financially and had a lot of financial stress and just trying to make everything work, that I told him after we got married, I'll never forget this. I said, I am happy to work every day of my life, but if it's okay with you, I want to contribute to the household financially and however, you know, we feel like it's best, but I don't ever want to pay another bill again as long as I live. And he said, well, that works for me because I'd rather control it anyway. So, I mean, it's worked out really well for us. Now, could I, if I had to? Sure. But it really has been a good, I guess, a good balance for us.
Yeah, a good like partnership between you two. You know, one of the things I think about a lot with what you're talking about there was coming to mind a lot is people get stuck in this poverty mindset even when they have money. I see it so often, especially when it's like new money. And I'm sure you see it even more often nowadays because like it's your industry. But one of the things that helped me get out, because I was raised very poor, very, very poor. You know, I remember the first time I made it out of high school, I was making my own money and I was making good money directly out of high school. And I had to do my tax return. And I was like, okay, wow, this is quite a bit of money. I was like, well, I wonder, am I making more than my parents made or around what they make, you know, as a household, as an individual? And so I called them. I was like, hey, how much money, what's the most amount you've ever had to turn in on your tax return?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And they said, you know, well, I don't know that, but I can tell you, you know, as a household of, you know, those my mom and my dad, and then I have 3 siblings, they've never made over $30,000 as a household.
Wow.
And so then I began to realize, I hung up the phone. Well, first I cried because it made me so sad that, you know, I didn't know that. I never knew that.
And it put even more things in perspective for you.
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up frustrated that I was the kid who didn't have money to go to the game and get extra food or go, you know, get the things. I was frustrated that I didn't have money to do the different things that other kids were doing. I just had no idea this is the lifestyle that we lived in. And it's mainly because it's not even my fault. It's because they didn't have that conversation with me. Yeah. It would have been maybe a little bit different, a little bit more understanding. At least later in my teens, I would have understood a little bit more. But one of the things that I found to help me get out of that mindset, this is probably the biggest life change for me, is to actually sit down and identify the type of lifestyle that you want to live. So you talked about eating out. for me, when I sat down and I did that when I was 19 years old, I was like, okay, what is the lifestyle I want to live, and how much does that lifestyle cost? Well, for me, being, a solo entrepreneur, I want to eat out and I want to go to a place. I want to Apple Pay and not have to look at my bank account. That's important to me. If I can do that as much as I want, if I want to eat every day that week, maybe not every single day, every month, but if I want to get lunch out, I don't know, half of the time,
Right.
I want to be able to do that.
Right.
I want to be able to go get coffee and not have to worry about it.
Right.
Whenever, actually. I want to get coffee whenever, not have to worry about it. Another thing I want to do is I want to be a blessing to others. I want to have enough in my account that I don't have to worry about, hey, if someone's behind me and I just feel the urge, I'm just gonna cover it today.
Yeah.
I'm able to do that. I want to make sure that I have enough to cover our bills and that my family feels taken care of.
Right.
I want enough to be able to host friends and family in a way that doesn't feel stressful to us. We don't have too small of a space. We don't have too big of a space.
Right.
We have just enough to make everyone feel comfortable in our
Right.
home. Those are things that were super important to me. And at that time in my life, I was 19, maybe I was 20 at that point. That quality of life only cost me about $40,000 a year. And so I was making 45 and I wasn't doing any of those things. So then I said, okay, it helped me to figure out what I needed to prioritize. Oh, I'm spending money on all this other extra stuff that is the lifestyle that I don't want to live. And so I switched my priorities and I actually ended up having, $5,000 left over that year to do different things. So did you ever get to a point to where you did that in your life?
Where I just decided whether I wanted to loosen up a little bit.
No, what type of lifestyle you wanted to live and how much did that lifestyle cost?
Yes, but it was later in life that I did that, and it was really more. I was in education for about 22 years, and the last 10-ish of those in administration, and I just made the decision that that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my working life. And so, and my husband was in full support of that. And, we had the conversation. I said, well, maybe I'll just stay home. And he said, that's fine. But, we'll have to make some adjustments, financially, and cut back in some areas that we really don't have to think about right now. To your point, like not think about what's in our bank account. But he asked me a great question. He said, that's fine if that's what you want to do. I know we can figure it all out. But he said, let me ask you this. He said, after the first 6 weeks, and you've painted every room and you've cleaned out every closet, he goes, then what are you going to do? And I thought, that's a really great question.
Yeah.
He knows me, maybe even better than I knew myself at that time, And so it was probably then, after I got out of education, and I intentionally tried some different jobs just because that's all I had ever known. And I thought, I wonder what it's like to work at a publicly traded company. So I went and worked at ArcBest for a couple of years as a pricing analyst. It was great for me. I loved the people there. The job was hard. I had to really stress my brain, which was good for me. And I loved it. But I didn't see myself ending my career in a cubicle. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I was accustomed to a little bit more freedom throughout the day, just with my schedule and all that. But I was also accustomed to working long hours. And so I tried a couple of different things. And then I thought, well, I've watched a lot of HGTV. I'm going to do what I guess a lot of women, if you're having a midlife crisis, I just thought I'm going to get my real estate license.
Okay.
So I did, got my real estate license. I've always been kind of fascinated with the real estate world. And I did that, and I sold real estate for about 2.5 years. And then I was approached by a friend of mine who was a mortgage lender looking to grow her team here. And she said, would you consider moving over out of real estate into the lending side? And honestly, it was such a blessing that I was given that opportunity, because I didn't know at that time how much being a mortgage lender just literally identifies with who I am and what I want, just all the way in the core. It was such a blessing. And it was a blessing because I get to stay in the world of real estate that I love, but I have a bachelor's degree in mathematics. And so to be on the lending side, it's like, in my mind, it's the perfect mix between sales, where I get out and get to talk to people and, help them feel good about the decisions that they're making and help educate them and help them not be afraid maybe for some of the decisions that they're making. But there's also that back end component of the analytics.
Yes.
And I really love the problem solving component of it, because that's a lot of what we have to do to make things work. And so really, I'm almost a decade in now as a lender, and it's been the best thing that ever happened to me.
It's really cool to kind of see the path that got you there.
Yeah.
Know? And also
definitely not intentional. It's not like I thought I'm going to become a mortgage lender. I never thought that.
But how did you get there though? Because I know you said that, you had to, like at the time your husband asked you that question and they help you kind of change directions. But what inspired the other different, journeys that you went on? Because if you didn't take each one of those steps, I don't know if you would have known.
Oh, I don't either. I don't really know other than, I tried a few different things, and I always liked real estate, but then I never felt like that was something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But I liked the atmosphere of it. And so when I became a mortgage lender, it was very challenging. I had no idea what most of the terminology was. I felt extremely overwhelmed. I know there were lots of tears, and
yes.
I had to take tests and pass tests and all of that sort of thing. But then, after, I don't know, a year or so, things kind of started clicking. And I remember I went to this sales. It wasn't a seminar. It was the company that I worked for at the time. Once a year they would gather all of their lenders together, and I met one of the top producers in the company at that time, and he had this little grid that he had put together, and had all these different things that you do throughout your week. And he had all these little boxes all over it, and he would fill in the boxes as he did these exact tasks. And he was a multi-million-dollar producer. And I was like, I want to figure this out. And so I got back home, and I sent him an email, and I asked him if he would be kind enough to share that grid with me, and maybe kind of the legend and how it all gets filled in. And he said, absolutely. He sent it to me. And that form, that document, single-handedly changed my trajectory in the lending world. I could have been, a smaller producer and been just fine, but that is what catapulted me into being more successful and having the desire to really make a difference in the lending community and in people's lives. Because it's a huge decision. And so even now when I hire a new lender to come work for me, that grid is a part of their training. I've written my own training manual for my lenders. And I have all these steps that I go through with them, and depending on where they experienced when I hired them, or are they brand new, where are we starting? So
you become a lender, but walk me to the point of how you get to where you are today, because I don't really know the tier system, but I imagine, you hire lenders now. So how did you get to the point to where you're at the tier that you are now? What type of qualifications did you have to have? What type of, rhetoric did you have to go through? And then what does your day-to-day life look like now?
So when I first became a lender, like I said, I had no idea what I was doing. And certainly had no idea that I would end up where I am today. And didn't become a lender thinking that's what I want to do or that's who I want to be. But over time, it just kind of evolved into that. I worked at a few different places and, took away great things from both places, but you also learn, that happened over here and I don't think that worked best. So, but this worked. And so I'm going to incorporate that. And then over here, this worked well. So I'm going to incorporate that. And so kind of the gathering of the things that were working, trying different techniques and different strategies to bring in new business and, develop that really strong referral partnership with people. I've always worked, except for one place, I've always worked as an as a mortgage lender in a standalone mortgage company versus a mortgage lender at a bank. You know, if you're at a bank and there's a lot of foot traffic, then you stand to gain a lot more business without having to go out and hustle up for it. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with working at a bank at all. And I think that that's the best fit for a lot of people. It wasn't the best fit for me. And so, I love being in a standalone mortgage company for lots of reasons, but, you know, a little bit more flexibility. The pay structure is typically very different. You have the ability, based on your work and your production, you have the ability to make more money as working for a mortgage company typically than you would at a bank. And so, you know, when I started experiencing some success, I was able to kind of take all these different things that I had learned along the way and put them together. And then,
if you don't mind, can I pause you there? I'm curious of what success looks like for you in your industry at that
for
time.
me personally,
yeah.
Okay. For me personally, what success looked like was developing the meaningful referral partnerships with people. When I first became a lender, I wanted business from anybody and everybody that would even throw me the opportunity. But as I grew and learned and just became more exposed with the lending world, I learned that the most meaningful parts of that to me were having those referral partners that knew me and trusted me and valued what I brought to the table as much as I valued that they trusted me enough to send me a customer and give me the opportunity to help them.
Yes.
And that is really the core of my business, and it has worked well for me. So there are some realtors that maybe they're not interested in having those closer relationships and those referral partnerships, and that's okay. They can run their business the way they want to. But there is certainly a large segment of them that they want that one referral partner that they can pick up the phone and call on a Saturday or a Sunday and say, hey, I've got these people in from out of town. They're ready to make an offer on something. They don't have a lender. We need a pre-approval letter. Can you help us? Absolutely. You know, sure. Happy to help you.
I'm glad you said that, because one of the things I actually wanted to ask you, that was one of them, but I'm curious of what you can offer since you're not inside of a bank and you're standalone. What are different things that you can do that a bank wouldn't be able to do necessarily? Like, I already know you said Sunday and Saturday, like being able to contact you is already something that's not typically normal. What are other things?
Right. The place where I work now, and that's really important in my opinion, is that banks have oftentimes, they have a lot of overlays. And what that means is that we're governed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. Those are the rule makers, and we have to follow the rules. If you are, you know, conducting business in what's called the secondary market. And what that means is we're closing loans and then we're selling them off on the secondary market. It's not sellable if you don't follow the rules that Fannie and Freddie have given you to follow. And so what I figured out was that I've lost my train of thought here.
No, you're okay.
Forgot what I was going to say.
Can you scoot that mic back just a little bit? Yeah, there
like
you go.
That? Okay, sorry. I'm trying to think where I was going with that.
You were basically talking about how you can operate outside the granny.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me on that. So what I figured out was that if I'm in a bank with overlays, the overlays they're taking the Fannie and Freddie guidelines, but then they're making them even harder. Okay. Or adding another layer to it.
Like the bank is.
The bank. And that's very common in banks. And they do that to minimize their risk. They say, here's the Fannie or Freddie guideline. We don't really like it there. We feel like that opens us up to too much risk. So we're going to make it, instead of a minimum credit score of 620, we're going to make it 660. And in every bank, even a mortgage company, we have the ability to do that. We can do that. So what was really important to me was being able to offer products and programs that didn't have a bunch of overlays.
Yeah.
And that's where I am now. And that was a huge factor in me making the decision to, move over to First Community Mortgage last year. That was a big, big deal.
Wait, did you say you worked in a bank before?
I worked at one bank before.
Okay. And while you were working in that bank, are these things that you recognize? Like, were there basically different things coming in, people coming in, and you saw that there were problems that couldn't be solved?
When I really recognized it, I didn't recognize it so much at that bank. But where I really do recognize it and still recognize it today is I get realtors call me in a panic because they have a borrower that's been to a bank or even another mortgage company. Anybody can have overlays.
Yes.
They've gone someplace else and they're 2 days before closing and their loan gets denied, oftentimes because of an overlay.
Wow.
And they come to me and they're in a panic. Can you help? And I'm like, just let me see. Let me get all of the information, get it all in. I'm like, yeah, we should be able to move forward. And I'll be able to close a loan that somebody else couldn't close. That was when I realized that overlays were a big deal.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I have a loan right now that this young couple buying their first home. And, you're anxious, you're nervous, you're excited, you're all of those things. It's a huge deal. And you've worked so hard to get to this point, and they were using a lender in another state where they had previously lived.
Yes.
And they were working to get a rural development loan here, a USDA loan here. And they were given some information from the other lender telling them that they didn't qualify for a USDA loan for a particular reason. And when they told me that reason, I was like, that's actually not accurate. I said, now it might be an overlay that they have, but that is not a USDA guideline. And so now we're moving forward. We're going to get them closed in their USDA loan. And our interest rate was significantly lower than what was being offered, to him. And so it really is working out well for that customer. And I'm so happy that their realtor said, just get a second opinion.
Wow.
That's
awesome. Okay, so I do want to talk about your team.
Sure.
But before we get there, I have some more questions because you brought up the young couple that you're doing a loan for. If someone's coming to you or someone's listening, I mean, I know a lot of young couples are listening and maybe they're buying their home for the first time or maybe they're even just trying to refinance or they're thinking about moving. What are some of the most important things that you recommend that these young couples are getting in order to make that next step, whether it's buying a home for a first time or et cetera?
Okay, great question. The first thing is that a lot of people don't realize is that purchasing a home, everything is largely tied to your credit score. So the stronger your credit score, the better off you are. When you're young, you have to develop and start doing things to actually have credit scores, and a lot of people, especially in this part of the country, we have small communities around us and they have the mindset of don't get into debt, pay cash for everything. Well, if you pay cash for everything, it's great, except that you're a ghost on paper.
Yes.
Nobody knows you exist. And so if you're a ghost on paper, a bank isn't going to loan you money because you don't have a credit score. And so, it's a function of making sure you have credit scores, making sure that they're decent. Whatever lines of credit you have, make those payments on time. On time. One late payment can tank your credit score. It's crazy how that happens, but it's true. So just make sure that you have scores, you're paying things on time. If possible, try to save a little bit of money, with each paycheck, put it aside to help with the down payment or closing costs. I do have a lot of programs where I can help with down payment or closing costs, but at the end of the day, if somebody's going to be 100% really prepared, those are the three things.
Okay, let me give you a scenario because,
Okay.
we hear everything you just said. I do love it, but that's the things we hear that from everybody. So let me give a scenario because it may help someone out a little bit better.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a young couple and they are looking to buy a home here in Fort Smith for about, let's just say about $200,000.
Okay.
Somewhere between $200,000 to $230,000. Let's just say there. What are you recommending that their credit score looks like? What are you recommending for a down payment? This is their first home, so maybe they qualify for some first time home buyer programs. What are you recommending that person needs to be at before they're ready, set, go to actually purchase?
Right. So in terms of credit scores are going to kind of drive what loan types would be best for them or that they're eligible for. So that's the first thing. So, generally your higher credit scores in the sevens you're going to probably gear more towards a conventional loan. When you start getting below that, then we're going to start probably looking at more of an FHA loan if we're inside city limits. And so that's where the credit score helps me decide what loan type is going to be best for them. And, every bank is different, but like in my world, I can do a FHA loan with a credit score down to 580. Now, does that mean if you have a credit score at the very bottom that's allowable by FHA, does that mean that it's going to be an easy breezy loan? No. So, the stronger you can get your credit score, the better. And then as far as figuring out what loan option is best for them, it's going to start with credit score, where the property is located. Is it eligible for a USDA loan? If it's not, then that's not an option. So unless they're a veteran, which is a whole separate category, and I love veterans, love VA loans, are probably some of my favorites. But so if we're looking at really a conventional versus FHA, that's going to be driven a lot by credit score. It's also going to be driven by, if they're a first-time home buyer, conventional, you can put as little as 3% down. FHA, you have to put 3.5% down. And so, maybe they have the option of going conventional and they don't have as much as some banks would say. Some banks don't have a 3% down conventional program. They have to have 5% down. And so it's a function of figuring that out. Then, like my first question to my first-time home buyers, once I have their loan application, is, okay, let's talk about your down payment. Do you have money set aside? Do you have a family member that has communicated that they want to help you with a down payment or gift you some funds for a down payment? Or do we need to look at down payment assistance programs and options that we might have to help you? And I've got 3 or 4 different programs, and that's where I just have to figure out which one do they fit in, because all of those programs have their own set of criteria with regard to credit score and, loan amount and all of that. And so it's really kind of fitting the pieces of a puzzle and figuring out what's going to be best for that customer.
That's why your job is this, I guess. It's because that's so much work for someone to have to try to figure out who to go to and what type of loan to apply for themselves. Another thing about that, though, that I do want to ask is, let's say, for instance, they are buying this house, let's just say 200, because that's easy math, right? So they're trying to buy this house for $200,000 and they do have to do the down payment. Well, outside of that down payment, I do understand that sometimes if you take the lower option of doing a down payment, then that, can higher or affect the interest rate. So maybe you're paying more monthly, even though you did a lower down payment. Can you kind of walk me through that as well? Is that a myth or is that true? Like, how does that work?
No, I mean, that can be true. The more you put down, obviously, the lower your payment will be. The more you put down can impact if you get a lower interest rate as well. And that's going to factor in multiple things from your full financial profile, but it can impact that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the main things people want to be looking for are, you want to be making sure your credit score is good. And if you do have credit or any type of lines, you're making sure to pay those up. And then 2, just getting everything in order, all the documents to submit to you.
Right. Awesome. Absolutely. And then, with regard to credit, especially credit cards, you want to, if you have $1,000 limit on your credit card, you want to try to keep your balances at a third or below.
Yes.
That has a huge impact on your credit score.
What about income as well? That's one thing we didn't talk about in the mix of that. So like, $200,000 house, what does income need to look like?
Well, I mean, that's going to be a function of how much debt do they have, because that's all going to play into their
ratio.
debt. It will. The biggest issue with income is that a lot of people seem to be going and opening up businesses of their own and self-employment and stuff, which is great. But, the regulations say you have to be self-employed for 2 years and have 2 years of tax returns before Fannie Mae says that you're eligible to purchase. Doesn't mean you couldn't go get a loan someplace else, but it wouldn't be a loan on the secondary market. You wouldn't get the best interest rate and that type of thing. And so a lot of people don't realize that I'm self-employed and I'm going to have to wait 2 years. Or maybe they take a job. They've been a W-2 employee. They've worked the same number of hours every week for a long time at one place of employment, and then they make a move and take a different job, and all of a sudden now they're either a commission employee, where maybe then their income now is like this.
Yes.
They or a 1099 employee where maybe their hours are variable and they get some commission on top of that. But anytime that your income has some variation to it, it can definitely impact your waiting period for being able to move forward.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that.
You're welcome.
I think that's very, very valuable. Maybe I feel like I need to just cut out that whole segment we did there.
It's very important.
And just post that, because that's a lot of information. Even what you just said about, if you're self-employed, I had no idea about that. When I first started the conversation about buying our home when we were in Texas, the first thing that I realized is the debt to income ratio, because I've always had decent income. I'm a business, right? So there's fluctuation.
Right, sure.
But if you average out the year, which is all that matters on a tax return, pretty good income. But when you looked at the debt, I was like, okay, now we have issues. So my first step was actually to eliminate debt. Yeah. So I went and, my last year was just paying off all debt, paid off all the debt. Now it's working on a credit score. And I do want to say, I'm curious about this for you too, if you have people that you recommend. One of the things that I did that was super helpful, and I'm about to start it back again, is there are different it's lawyers, the attorneys that you can hire, and they will actually go and work on your credit score on your behalf. That was so helpful for me. So I was an idiot in college. And I got into debt. Yeah, I got into some debt that I just shouldn't have gotten into. Mainly your credit cards, maxed them out, and then couldn't pay them off, right? So they defaulted, they did the whole thing. Well, I did pay them off. They're still on my credit report. And then let's say there's one that still had maybe like $100 balance, and I just never realized it, whatever.
Right.
So what these people would do is they would go get that paid off for you, get it removed off your credit report, communicate to these different companies on your behalf. And then also when you have debt, they paid it off pennies on the dollar. And that was so helpful for me. They eliminated so many things to help my credit score to get back to where it is. Because a lot of people don't realize, even if you have credit and you're making payments, you could have this one little stupid thing on your credit report that's keeping it down every month. And that's basically where I was when where I was sitting. So do people come to you with issues like that and you have to explain that process to them?
They do. And, I've gotten pretty good at being able to look at their credit report and ask questions and make suggestions and things like that. I'm certainly not in a position to do what you described, where an attorney can get involved and, help with a settlement amount and even have things removed off of their credit report. I'm not in a position to do that, but helping them understand what is impacting your score and why, so that they don't continue to repeat that, is probably one of the most enlightening things for them, because they had no idea. They didn't know that if your balance was more than a third of your allowable limit, that it has a huge impact on your score. That late pays, even one late pay, can really, it could decrease your credit score to the point of making you ineligible for a loan at this time. And so just helping educate them. Now, if I feel like that there's so much going on with their credit report and that I'm not in a position to really help them, then I would suggest something like what you just described, for sure. because to get some things removed off of your credit report can make all the difference in the world.
And for a long term too, because people don't realize that stuff stays on for 7+ years.
Yes.
So if you can pay, I mean, for me, it was like maybe $2,000 total. If you can pay $2,000 total now, you have that money.
Yep.
Because I was saving up for a house. So I had the money.
Right.
If you can pay that now and get it removed and you don't have to wait 7 years, that's a big difference.
Even better.
Maybe a life circumstance comes up and you do need an extra credit. Now you're eligible for that credit card if you need it, or a loan, whatever you need. So helpful.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about your team. Because
Okay.
you build teams.
Yes.
Like that's a big part of your job. One of the biggest parts of your job is team building and recruiting. What have you found challenging in doing so? And what are some of the specific hurdles you're proud that you've overcome so far?
Great question. I've always said that probably in my mind, in my opinion, in the jobs that I've had, and certainly in management positions that I've had over the course of my life, not just in mortgage lending, the hardest thing to do is hire. You know, people can interview great. They can tell you all the right things. They can say all the right things, but then maybe they fall short on the execution. Maybe they're scared. You know, there could be any number of things that factor into it, but I think that hiring is very difficult. There have been some people in the past that have worked for me when I was not at First Community Mortgage, when I was at my prior place of employment, that worked for me. And, you know, for different reasons, it didn't work out. No hard feelings at all. But I look back at that and think, what were the things that caused them to not stay here? And largely it was a variety of things, but you know, we don't realize how terrifying it is to a lot of people to walk into a real estate office just randomly with their business cards and go talk to people. I don't mind doing it. I could do it all day, every day, but not everybody feels that way. It can be very intimidating and very, very scary for them. You know, I try to do some role playing with my team. Like, let's say that I'm the front desk lady at a big real estate company, which means I'm the gatekeeper, and you're going to walk in. Let's talk about what that looks like. And I'll role play like I'm the person behind the desk. But you know, I've had lenders that came to work for me that were very well connected and knew people and had great opportunity, but to go through an exercise like that, they just shut down. They couldn't do it. And so, you know, everyone has their set of challenges. And, you know, I've had lenders, a few of them leave just because the lending world is hard. This job is hard.
Yes.
It's also highly competitive. You know, I joke and say we have a bank on every corner. If it's not a bank, it's a mortgage company. And there is some truth to that. And so, you know, you better be good at your job, and or you're not going to be getting a piece of the pie.
Yes.
And so, and a lot of it is the time, it's very time consuming. And, you know, if you're really going to push over into the realm of being successful in all, I guess, from many fronts, financially, with a good, strong referral base, then you're going to have to be prepared to work some evenings and some weekends.
What I really found, and I know we talked about it a lot, but I was so surprised to learn that really when it comes to loans and getting money from a bank, I was incredibly surprised of how much of it actually comes down to relationships. Like seriously, you know, so Mr. Rick, you know, Rick Mooney, he's been so nice to me, and he's been walking me through the whole process because, you know, my father is still around. I love my father, and we're good. But he, like I said, we grew up poor, and, you know, unfortunately, that's still the lifestyle that they live in. He doesn't know a lot about money.
Right.
He just doesn't. So I've been blessed to have people like Mr. Rick in my life who are now helping me understand these relationships, because I've always been incredibly afraid of going to a financial institution of any sort and trying to get money from them. So I haven't. I haven't done it. So what I learned with going to the bank and just learning about loans and getting started, he went there, we had a conversation, that type of thing. It sounds like I'm a kid, but yeah, that's what we did. Is she told me that it literally is relationships. You know, so you give them your paperwork I gave them my paperwork. I had it all printed out in a nice PDF, almost like a resume. Here's how much money I make. Here are my, because I am self-employed, it's not as easy as just printing out.
Right.
So I print out my statements, but I also am like, okay, well, here's my reoccurring money that I have coming in from different clients that I work with. And she didn't even look at it the whole time. We just had a conversation. What does your life look like? What do you do? What's your goals? What are you trying to do in the future? And then I'm sure, obviously, she looked at it later.
Right.
But it really was just us having a conversation like we are now, to the point to where I just felt disarmed after a while.
Right.
I'm like, I wish I would have had this conversation when I was 19 instead of going and taking these other options of money that were really put me in a bad position, to be honest. High interest rates. Just not having access to someone to talk to when something's going wrong.
Right.
Hey, something came up. I need to make this payment, in a couple days instead of on time. Just having those conversations if something came up. And so how much of what you do now when it comes to working with the team is actually relationships that you've taught them? Like, what does that look like on a practical basis? So someone comes in and they say, hey, I want to work for you, or you go and you say, hey, I want you to work for me. What does that actually look like versus like documents that they have to qualify for to work with you, or relationships that in the type of person that they are?
As far as how everything starts, the relationship is the base. The relationship of us with our referral partners, of us with our customers. And if you have a strong relationship and you have that basis, and it's built on trust,
yes,
and built on them realizing that you are experienced and you are the advisor of whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish, and that you're there for them, and that you want them to succeed as much as they want to succeed, and that you're in their corner, then if you can foster that on the front end, then the rest of it and everything else that comes is easy. I have had some customers that I have worked hard to foster those relationships with and just wasn't able to. And so it felt like throughout the process, it didn't mean that they went someplace else, and it didn't mean that we didn't get their loan closed. But, there have been a couple of occasions that I kind of felt like I was being treated like a common criminal, like I was, and it was because they didn't trust me. And maybe that was because they'd had a bad experience before with somebody else, or maybe that's just who they are as a person. I don't know. But it sure didn't feel good,
Yes.
And so, when I first started out as a lender, my philosophy was get business from anyone and everyone out there. Well, at the end of the day, there's so many realtors and so many opportunities to have these referral relationships with people. There are not enough hours in the day to get business from everybody.
Yes.
So then then it becomes find those relationships that are meaningful to you and to them, whereas there is this reciprocity and this partnership so that you all can help each other. And that same thing exists with your customers, because when you start, there's no better feeling than working with a customer and then they come back to you for their next house, or they refer their brother and sister, or they want to buy a second home now at the lake or whatever. They come to you because they see you truly as their advisor in that department.
Is that important to you because you value the fact that you feel, that person trusts you because they came back? Is that why that feels so significant to you?
Yes, it is. It feels like they trusted me enough to come back. I've had some people, I'm working with one right now, actually. I've had some people that I've worked with and then are moving on to go build a home or buy another home now, and they went someplace else. And they actually went under contract to buy a house, got a pre-approval from another bank, and then ran into a problem. The lender apparently sent him a text that said, oh, yeah, sorry, I can't do your loan now. And so he called me, and I said, well, based on, he's self-employed, had started a business. And I said, well, let me see your tax returns. And he sent him over, and I said, I'm not trying to be rude. I don't know how they gave you that pre-approval. And I said, because the way your accountant has your tax returns structured, that's not going to help me provide enough income to move forward. I wish I could. So that whole deal fell apart. And, but he said, I should have come to you in the first place. I knew. He said, you helped me before and I trusted you. I don't even know why I went over there. And I said, well, maybe they're a newer lender and they didn't know how to go through the tax returns, correctly or whatever. And I said, but, I'm always here to help you. I am, and don't hesitate to reach out to me. And so now fast forward, we're working on getting a home built for him.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Money means so much to so many different people. For some, it's security. For others, it fills a void in their life. What does it mean to you? And how have you seen the loans that you've been a part of in someone's life change their life in a meaningful way?
As far as me personally, money means stability and security. And it means that I have the ability to have options or choices that maybe I wouldn't have had otherwise. I've never been a person that just wants to go spend. I know a lot of people that do, and that I'm not faulting them. I'm just saying it makes me uncomfortable. Anytime that I've ever been at a period in my life where I've spent a ton of money on something, I just kind of get this pit in my stomach, like, you better scale it back.
Yeah. And
so I think a lot of that just comes from either the way I was brought up, but also being a single mom. Mm-hmm. And so I reached this level of being uncomfortable. I don't have to spend it. I just like to have it.
Yes.
And it makes me feel safe and secure. As far as my customers go, the thing that's great about customers is that, I have done loans for people from all walks of life, low income, moderate income, middle income, high income, all the way up to what I would describe as pretty wealthy. But what's probably one of the most rewarding times for me is when I see a person that, probably struggled as a child and their family struggled as a child, and they have either gotten a scholarship or put themselves through some kind of school, whether a college or a trade or whatever it was, or maybe they just ended up getting a job and working really hard and moving up within that company. And they all by themselves have created some financial stability. And then for them to come to me and want to buy a home, and be able to facilitate that transaction for them there's nothing like it, And so because their hard work, their blood, sweat, and tears, and their desire to be able to participate in the American dream of home ownership, they made that happen, for themselves. They set the stage for it. I just put it all together.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. In some of my pre-interview questions, I asked you what's one of the things you're proud of. And you said the fact that you have a team that trusts you. We talked about this a little bit, but why is that important to you, especially in this industry? And how did you go about gaining that trust? I know we talked about it a little bit, but kind of like a little bit more in depth. Like, how did you gain a trust between them?
Well, I mean, honestly, before I moved over to First Community Mortgage last year in May, I had a few people on my team at my prior place, and I probably didn't do a very good job of managing them because my personal production was rolling hard, and by the time I took care of my own stuff, I didn't have enough left to give to my team, and that wasn't fair to them. And so when I left my old place of employment and went to First Community Mortgage, there were a couple of people that I had worked with over at my prior place that I would love to have had on my team here, and they are on my team now. But one of them in particular, and I was so thankful that she did this. We always maintained a friendship and all of that. Love being around her. She's always the life of the party. Hilarious. But when I asked her if she wanted to move from where she was over to First Community Mortgage, she said, well, can I be honest with you? And I said, absolutely. And she goes, I didn't particularly like working for you last time. And I said, thank you so much for telling me that. And I said, but now let's talk about what you didn't like and what you felt like I failed you on. I need to know that. And so we had a great conversation where she just really and helped me, look within myself. And so I made the decision at that moment that if I'm going to grow a team, then my team comes first.
Yes.
My work on my files, if I have to be up until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning to catch up, that's just how it's going to be. And so once I made that decision, when I moved over to First Community Mortgage, my team has grown exponentially and everyone's happy. I put them first, their training, their phone calls, their emails, whatever it may be, I put them first. And it has really made a huge difference.
That's awesome. So at this time, we're going to jump into what is called the second layer. We've had the chance to really get to know you and your profession and what you've done over the years, from being a lender, teaching at some point, also in real estate. But now we're going to get to know you on a personal level. Okay. So I have some questions for you.
Okay.
Sometimes people cry. Are you ready to cry with these questions? I'm joking.
I hope I don't cry.
Okay, first question. If I had quietly been watching your journey over the past 2 years, how would I describe the person who's sitting in front of me today?
Wow. I would say resilient, determined, hopefully kind, straightforward, hard worker, things like that. And I feel like over the last 2 years, my life has been on a little bit different path than it was, and maybe that it would have been, I'm not sure, but just something to share with you. In about 3.5 years ago, out of the clear blue, I was diagnosed with a type of endometrial type cancer that had no idea, but they said, it's fine. You'll have a radical hysterectomy. Everything should be fine after that, after the surgery, typically. And my PET scan showed that I was at a stage 1. They said, you're the perfect candidate for surgery. Great. I had the surgery a few weeks later, go in a week after that for my checkup, and come to find out the cancer had already spread to some of my lymph nodes. And so that moved me up to like a stage 4. Well, things got real quickly, real fast. And it's not that prior to that, I always tried to live my life faithfully and by, just with integrity and good characteristics and traits, and model good behavior and be kind to everyone else. But it also, it was a huge reminder to me of, I wouldn't have gotten through that without really making sure that my faith was at the top of everything. Because you can easily let fear overcome you. And that wasn't an option for me. So, a lot of prayer, a lot of just grit and digging in. And of course, I had the best support system. I was so lucky for that. But it was hard. I went through 6 weeks of radiation every single day and had chemo during the same 6 weeks. That was in 2021 when the market was insane. I was busier than I'd ever been at work, ever. And I couldn't even go to work. I worked just out of my bed. And it was difficult. It was really difficult. But, looking back at that, it really was an opportunity for me going into this next stage of my life to be reminded of, and maybe even refocus on everything that just really matters. And so I'd like to say that the person I am today over the last 2 years is a more focused and driven and stronger version of who I was before that.
Thank you for sharing that.
You bet.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
You bet.
How would your daily life, this is going to be funny. So I have questions like this, and you're okay. Probably like the third or fourth person who sat here. Okay. I just have to laugh when asking this. How would your daily life look different if money was no longer a concern?
How would it look different? Well, it'd probably look really different. One, I'd probably be on a beach.
Yeah.
No, I think a lot of things would look different. I don't know that I would be doing things a lot differently.
Yes. I'm glad that you say that. I'm glad that most of the people who sit across from me say that, because nothing is worse for me than to be a part of someone's life who's doing something they don't want to do. You know, that just sucks. I've been there. I get it that we have to do that.
Sure.
But there's a difference between doing something we have to do, and some people settle and live there. So I'm so glad that everyone that I've talked to so far are not settling and living in those spaces where they're doing things they don't want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting older. Obviously, at some point, I want to scale back and eventually retire, but I'm not there yet. My work isn't done, because the last thing that I want to do is to work hard to hire people and train people and build our brand and build our business, and then just say, okay, I'm ready to retire. I'll see y'all later.
Yes.
I mean, this is like my baby. And I am going to make sure that I am working and getting measures in place and people in place to continue this moving forward, even better than I've been able to do. You
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah.
And you know, we have 3 children. Our middle son works for me.
Okay.
And works with me. And he has a 7-year-old special needs child that is just precious. But it's really important to me that both of them have a good life. And with our grandson, you know, his medical needs are, he's pretty fragile medically. He's nonverbal, and there's a lot that goes into his care. And he John, our grandson, and him and his care, they come before anything else. And so I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to work with my son every day, but also that he has the flexibility that he needs to be the dad and the caretaker that he needs to be. And I will make sure before I step back that everything is solid, so that their life continues.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If your soul had an age, what would it be and why?
Oh my God.
Because I know your actual age is only 36, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If my soul had an age, oh gosh. I would think in a lot of situations, I'm an old soul, probably from being a little bit more conservative when it comes to spending money and that type of thing, and maybe just even in how I approach life and view things, you know. But then I would say that then I have a part of my soul that I'm in my mind, I'm still in my 20s, and you know, and so one of the jokes that we always have is someone will say, "Oh, come over and have another glass of wine or something," and I'll be like, "Well, my spirit really wants to be there."
Yes,
my spirit really wants to be there, but this body, because I have to go to work tomorrow, that's just not going to happen.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like, you know, the what is it? The devil and the angel, you know, they're kind of battling back and forth. And so, you know, I feel like there's this mature, settled, confident side of my soul. And then I feel like there's this other component that in my mind, I'm still young and I can still do all the things that I used to do, but I just can't.
I don't like calling that one the devil, though, because sometimes you have to listen to that.
No, it's not the devil.
Sometimes your body and your mind needs that, like, you know what? It's been a hard week.
Oh.
I am going to come over for that glass of wine.
Yes.
I'll be there, you know. I'll just show up.
Oh, and I do that.
Yeah.
I do that. I just, there are just times that I have to have some sense.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah, that's funny. If you lost everything tomorrow, what's the first thing you'd do?
I'd start all over again.
Same thing?
Yeah. I'd rebuild exactly because I know I can do it again. If I've done it this time, I can do it again. Absolutely.
That's awesome. That's the first time I've had that answer. That's great. What's one thing you wish more people knew about you?
Knew about me? Oh, gosh. I don't know that. One thing I wish they knew about me.
Knew more about you.
Oh, more about me.
It could be like a misconception or something that, you know, you're in a conversation and you're like, I really don't feel like these people understand me well. I wish they knew this more about me.
I think that if there's one thing that I think I can give off the wrong impression sometimes is that I am very direct. And, being direct is a good thing because it implies honesty.
Yes.
But it also can be interpreted by some people as being aggressive or, opinionated or a know-it-all or whatever. And so I would just say if I'm direct to you, it's because I care about you and I want you to know the truth about whatever it is that we're discussing. I don't think that it's really hindered me significantly in any way. But I do think that it can certainly be misunderstood or misinterpreted.
Yes,
for
absolutely.
Sure. You know, and especially as a female.
Yeah,
I mean, men just innately, I feel like they're very direct, and then they just let things roll off their back and move on. I think, especially in the workforce, if a lot of females said the exact same things that some men said in their work environments, that it would be interpreted two different ways.
Yes, I agree. I completely agree. Yeah, that's so true. Okay, before we end here, I want to do a fun little game. Thank you for getting to the second layer.
Okay.
This is called the natural state of things. I'll ask you 5 questions, some Arkansas themed, some personal to your profession. Just say the first thing that comes to mind. Okay? Are you ready?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. What's your favorite small town in Arkansas to visit when you need to get away from it all?
Shoal Bay.
Never even heard of this.
Yep.
Shoal Bay?
I don't even know if it's a city. It's a community. It's down near New Blaine, Arkansas.
What are you saying?
I know. I have a made up
words
word
right now.
Okay, so Highway 22, Rogers Avenue. You're going to go about an hour and 10 minutes down Highway 22 through Charleston and Paris.
Yes.
Through Subiaco.
Okay.
Get to the other side of Subiaco. You're going to go through this intersection. It's called Midway.
Yes.
It's Midway of what? I don't know.
Yes.
But it's literally an intersection. You keep going 6 miles past Midway, and you're going to see a sign for a little Catholic church, St. Scholastica, I think is what it is. And you turn left there, and you wind your way down to the lake. There's a lake there, Lake Dardanelle, and that's where a large portion of my family is.
Oh,
my first cousins, and their children, and their dogs, and their boats, and their party barns, and their you name it. That's their fire pits. And so I don't get down there near as much as I want to. But if I want to completely unplug and just go and have the best time.
Yes.
That's where I'm going to go.
Okay. I know who to ask now.
That's where I'm going. 4-wheelers. You
that sounds
it. We
amazing.
do all the stuff.
Yeah. If you could wave a magic wand and fix one common misunderstanding that people have about the home loan process, what would it be? Let me read that again.
Okay.
If you could wave a magic wand and fix one common misunderstanding people have about the home loan process, what would it be?
That it's too hard for them to get through. It's not. If you have the right lender that will, that you trust and that can walk you through the process and explain things to you along the way. But it is very overwhelming to a lot of people.
Yes. I mean, yeah. Yeah. Just the thought of it kind of can be overwhelming. Okay. Number 3, Razorback tailgating or quiet cabin weekend. What's your ideal Saturday?
Oh, gosh. Well, it depends. If my husband is with me, I'm going to have to say the tailgate.
Yes.
If I were going to go by myself, I would say the cabin.
Okay. You a Razorback fan yourself?
Well, I didn't go to college at Fayetteville, but my husband did. And so we have football tickets. Our youngest son graduated from there a couple of years ago. And so I guess by proxy,
yes,
I'm a Razorback fan. I've lived in this area my whole life. So sure. And I love the Razorbacks, and we do tailgate. I love all of that. But I don't enjoy sitting in that football stadium because the seats are so close together. And
I'm just going to tell you sound very bougie right now.
Well, I'm just saying you go sit in my seats and tell me that you were comfortable with the person behind you, their knees in your back, and then you have to turn sideways because, the stadium, most of it is an old stadium, and the seats truly the people today, I don't know if they
Yeah.
thought everybody was really small back when they made these seats.
Yes.
But I'm telling you, it's hard for a lot of people to sit there and be comfortable.
Especially if you're higher up too. I feel like it kind of gets weird.
Yeah.
The
But
lower ones are better, I think.
I'll tell you where the most comfortable ones is on that one end zone, because those seats are new, and that has the actual hard seat that's there, the whole thing, and they're spread out more.
Yes. Yes.
But it's always fun. We always see people we know. Go to my husband's fraternity house, and he'll get to see some of the guys he went to school with, and it's always a great time. And I really like Fayetteville a lot. I like Northwest Arkansas a lot.
But you would choose a cabin.
If I were going by myself.
Yeah.
And my husband thinks I'm weird because I wouldn't hesitate to go to a cabin, the beach, Colorado, a spa. I wouldn't hesitate to go any of those places by myself. I don't mind traveling by myself.
That's not weird.
A lot of people think it's weird, but I think it's okay. I'd go to Las Vegas by myself.
Okay, that's weird.
It is. I know. I know.
Do you have a gambling problem we need to talk about?
No, I do love Las Vegas though. I do.
That's funny.
I do.
What's the best local restaurant near your office that more people need to know about?
Oh gosh. Well, the one that I go to a lot that I actually recommend, like if I'm going to go to lunch with a realtor or somebody, I'll give them choices. Like, okay, how about we do this, or this? And I do try to stay local. I'm a big fan of trying to support local businesses. But one of the places that I always throw in there, and I started doing it kind of as an experiment because I love to eat there. But what I have found is that when I throw it in the mix, almost everybody chooses it. Is Art's Barbecue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah. It's just random.
That's great. So what are the others though? What are the others?
The other places.
Give me two more that you throw in there with that.
So El Arito Mexican on 70th Street.
Yes.
That one is really good. The other local places, sometimes I go to Stonehouse for lunch. That's if I'm trying to, be a little bougie.
Smooze.
Yeah.
Wait, what do you call it when you're trying to smooze someone? Yeah.
Yeah. I like Stonehouse. There are several restaurants that I really like downtown. I love AJ's.
Yes.
Love AJ's. It's just hard for me to get all the way downtown sometimes.
I know.
But I do love AJ's. And then there are some locally owned restaurants that are only open for dinner that I wish were open for lunch.
Yes. I really want to go to Blue Point Steakhouse.
Yes, I'm going there Saturday.
Okay.
So
report back.
I will.
Let me know.
I've been there a couple of times and have had a great experience.
Okay. So you've already been there? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just a couple of times. Once I sat on the dinner side, and another time it'd been a long week. And my son, I'm like, let's go to the bar at Blue Point because it's a beautiful little setting. So I thought, let's just go sit out there.
That's awesome.
So it was nice.
Okay. Last one. What's one trait you always look for when hiring a new team member? First thing that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. The first thing that comes to mind on that is somebody that seems to be and comes across as though they're very driven. And that they are willing to go that extra mile and put in the work that it's going to take to be successful. My new loan officers that I hire, and I've got some that have a little experience. I have some that are experienced, and then I have some that are brand new. And what I tell all of them is, if you will follow these training steps, doesn't matter what level you are within your career, if you will follow these steps and live by them religiously for 2 years, it will change your business and it will change your life.
That's awesome. Yes. Well, we're at the end. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to just roll out the red carpet for you. If there's anything you want to share with anyone, maybe you're looking for some new hires, you can go ahead and share. Also, how people can connect with you online.
Okay, perfect. So our office here is First Community Mortgage. We are located off of Phoenix basically kind of at the end of Phoenix, across the side street from Aldi. I'm in the little shopping center where you have the Black Bison and then Old Fashioned Foods. And then I'm on the other side of that, at the end of the little shopping center. So I am always looking to talk to and hire good lenders, or someone that thinks they might be interested in lending. But, it's no secret the mortgage world is a little hard right now. But I'm not just looking in Arkansas. So our company, I can do a loan anywhere in the country with the exception of 2 states. And so I actually have some loan officers in Texas. I have one in Alabama, and I'm looking to expand those areas for sure as well. So anyone that's looking, give me a call, or looking to buy. Looking to refinance. I'm happy to help. Even if you just have a scenario that you're not sure what to do about and you just want to talk about it, do that. And so, I might be in the market for a couple of full-time processors or like admin assistants and things like that. Right now, I'm so busy, I don't even have a chance to. I have a handful of resumes, and I haven't even had a chance to look over them and figure out, what I want to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun. I'm glad that I got to know you a little bit better.
Yes, you too. Well, I got to know you a lot more than you got to know me.
I know.
Maybe we would have to go get that wine.
Yes. Or you know what we could do next time?
Yes.
I get to sit over there and ask you all the questions.
Very interesting. You did talk about podcasts, maybe.
I want to ask you a whole bunch of questions because my brain's going, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.